An estimated 6,000 ships have been lost to the hellish waters of the Great Lakes. Some suggest that in terms of capsized vessels per square mile, the lakes consume more boats than anywhere else on the planet. Many are familiar with the November Witch or November Gales popularized by Gordon Lightfoot's track, The Wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald, a ballad for the freighter that capsized in Lake Superior on November 10, 1975. A ship that's demise is still considered a mystery 50 years later. With such a treacherous reputation, it's no surprise that the Great Lakes are a hotbed for tales of the paranormal or extraterrestrial. There are rumors of spirits haunting lighthouses, ghost ships, UFOs, and underwater monsters. I don't know much about those other stories, but there is one special phenomenon that disproportionately impacts those that call the shores of these lakes home. November 4, 2001. The Chicago Bears are hosting the Cleveland Browns, riding a 5-game win streak. The historic Soldier Field welcomes 69,000 fans in a sold-out venue that predates the controversial 2003 renovation. The excitement is palpable. This is Chicago's best start to a season in over a decade. A week earlier, the Bears pulled off an incredible comeback in this stadium against the 49ers. Trailing by 15 with less than 5 to play, rookie receiver David Terrell would haul in 2 touchdowns before Anthony Thomas ran in a 2-point conversion to tie it. The Niners won the toss, but on the first play of overtime, Terrell Owens bobbles a pass right into the waiting arms of Mike Brown, who'd return the pick for a touchdown and finish off the incredible comeback with the shortest overtime in league history to that point. Tonight, a few hours after the opening kickoff, the Bears are facing an even more uphill battle. Fresh off of leading back-to-back scoring drives against the Niners, quarterback Shane Matthews fumbles and it's returned by the Browns for a scoop and score. He'd follow it up with back-to-back interceptions on Chicago's next 2 series. Shortly after half, Tim Couch would hit Mike Sellers for a touchdown after he beats last week's hero, Mike Brown. The safety would be victimized again on Cleveland's next drive, as a pass he should have intercepted is deflected into the hands of a receiver who walks in for a 55-yard touchdown. Both heroes from a week ago, responsible for the 21-7 deficit. Phil Simms and Greg Gumbel remarked that the game is over, while suggesting that neither the soon-to-be 5-2 Bears nor the soon-to-be 5-2 Browns are fluke teams, and that they'll both go on to have successful seasons. Comments that are only half true because the Browns live in hell. Shane Matthews would eventually engineer a late touchdown drive, scoring with just 28 seconds remaining, and the announcers discussed the all-important onside kick attempt. Phil Simms carries on suggesting that coaches and kickers practice these all the time, both he and Gumbel trying to engage the audience in an effort to drum up drama. After all, we know how unlikely an onside recovery is.
Doesn't get a bounce. Oh, there's a high hop. It is a pile-up inside midfield. Let's see who comes up with the football.
The officials determined that the Bears recovered at the bottom of the pile. A few plays later, Matthews heaves up a Hail Mary as time expires. The ball is tipped before a diving James Allen answers the prayer. The Bears win the overtime coin toss, but the Browns' defense locks back in to force a 3-and-out. Conventional wisdom would probably suggest that the Bears should have gone for this 4th and short near midfield, especially in a sudden death situation. But analytics are for nerds. This era plays football. The punt pins the Browns at their own 11. Couch completes a 16-yard pass before taking a sack, and the Gales of November strike.
Mike Brown has done it again!
Mike Brown catches the tipped ball and runs in his second overtime pick 6 in as many weeks. This victory, the result of a successful onside kick recovered with just 28 seconds remaining, exists as a miracle. While Chicago fans celebrate what they know to be a special moment, I wonder if many understood how rare an outcome they had experienced. Regardless, they couldn't have known that a mere quarter-century later, the play that catalyzed the impossible would meet the same fate as so many sailors that had braved the waters of these Great Lakes, slowly slipping beneath the waves, existing as folklore, with future generations doubting its existence at all. Because the onside kick is dead.
Saints football and recover the onside kick. What a start to the second half.
At least in the realm of professional American football. Sure, even in the Big 2-5, we see at least one attempt every week of the NFL season. We've even been blessed with 3 successful conversions so far this year, though all these teams would inevitably lose. Based on the math, it's possible we've witnessed the last successful onside kicks in NFL history. Even so, what we see now is the corpse of a once iconic staple of the sport, a zombified rendition, a play that at one time stood out as the in-game scratch-off of a gridiron chess match, now carrying the same desperation as that 10-leg parlay you place every week to fantasize about buying a house, with teams statistically more likely to win via Hail Mary than as the result of a successful onside. In October 2025, NFL Executive Vice President Troy Vincent remarked that while the league is happy with the progress of the new dynamic kickoff, the onside kick remains a point of contention, and that perhaps it's time to revisit previously rejected efforts to implement a modified version of the Schiano proposal. For those unfamiliar, the Schiano proposal was a suggested rule change made by Rutgers head coach Greg Schiano. This came after one of his players was paralyzed during a kickoff. His idea was to eliminate the play altogether, and instead have would-be kicking teams attempt a 4th and 15 from their own 30. This idea would often result in teams punting the ball away, but if they were desperate, they could always attempt to convert the 4th and 15 in an effort to retain possession. Other variations of this proposal have been discussed and even attempted in second-rate football leagues. The Alliance of American Football, a league with an extremely short-lived existence, eliminated all kickoffs and instead allowed for teams to attempt a 4th and 12 conversion should they be trailing with less than 5 minutes remaining or be down by 17 or more points. Other minor leagues like fan-controlled football and the USFL have also experimented with similar alternatives to the onside kick. In 2019, the Denver Broncos proposed the adoption of the AAF solution, an effort that was favored by the competition committee before being rejected by league owners in both 2019 and 2020. And just last year in 2024, the idea was revisited by league officials, once again failing to generate enough support for the change to be adopted by the NFL. I'm here to tell you that the rule change is inevitable. At this point, it's not a matter of if, but when the Shield elects to adopt a variation of the Schiano proposal. For better or worse, it will mark the final nail in the coffin of the Hands team. Whether it happens immediately following the 2025 season or takes until 2030, it's clear that those in charge of the sport want it gone. In fact, this conspiracy has existed for over a decade. But why? The history of the onside kick dates back to the history of gridiron football itself. Much like baseball, the sport's origins are rooted in a deviation from the traditional rules of a much more globally popular sport, with baseball being freedom cricket and football being freedom rugby. I promise this is important, because the architects of the game started out with the understanding that this game was rugby. They were just modifying the rules as they saw fit. Walter Camp pioneered the biggest changes, most notably the snap and eventually the down system of needing to advance the ball a minimum distance in a limited number of snaps to retain possession. The game continued to slowly evolve over the course of the late 19th century until the early 1900s when President Teddy Roosevelt threatened to ban the sport unless rule changes were made due to the high frequency of football-related fatalities. The result was the inception of the NCAA and adoption of the forward pass, among other rule changes, though at the time, an incomplete pass resulted in a turnover. Most scrutiny of the official rules was reserved for what happened outside of kickoffs. There was too much other shit to focus on, and the kickoff was one of the few things that got, if it ain't broke, don't fix it treatment. I think there was largely an understanding of this too. By 1920, Spalding's official football guide contained 64 pages of rules. The rather brief section about the kickoff more focused on its use to begin halves and restart play after a score. Most mentions of the term onside in both the 1920 and 1921 guides relates to the position of players during kicks and plays from scrimmage. Nowhere in these rules is the modern onside kick given legitimacy. It merely states that the kick must go 10 yards, and that if the ball is declared dead in the end zone while in possession of the kicking team, the result is a touchdown. Seriously, there is a football code with sections about talking to your opponents, talking to the officials, coaching from the sidelines being prohibited, and even a section on crawling. Yet it's supposedly common knowledge that after a kick goes 10 yards, it's a live ball. Naturally, this means that the use of the onside kick was not at all common. Back then, field position was considered much more important than possession of the ball itself, and the lack of high-octane offense certainly played a role. According to football archaeology, it wasn't until the mid-1950s that teams began to use the onside kick more regularly. Maybe it's because football was considered a scholarly sport. The gentleman's approach to the game would scoff at the use of such slimy tactics to gain an advantage. Or maybe they were just stupid, because even in 1907, there is evidence that Princeton attempted an onside kick against Yale and it nearly won them the game against the eventual national champions. It could just be me though. You know that feeling you get when your friend breaks out a board game that they swear is super fun and not really complicated, and then they start going through the rules, and in your head you're thinking, this is the most convoluted waste of brain power I've ever experienced, until your friend gives up and says it'll be easier to just learn as we go. That's how it feels reading historical documentation related to football, but especially so for the onside kick. Even with an alleged uptick in onside kick use in the 50s, it clearly didn't become a big part of football strategy. Fast forward to the Super Bowl era. Even in the most important game of the year, teams rarely felt desperate enough to attempt an onside kick. The Chiefs and Raiders didn't attempt one despite being blown out by the Packers. The Colts converted the first ever onside attempt in a Super Bowl after a score to cut into the Jets' lead in Super Bowl III. In Super Bowl VII, Washington scored a touchdown after a famous failed field goal attempt, but instead of attempting an onside with 2 minutes remaining, kicked it deep. Dallas successfully used the play in Super Bowl XIII, but being down 2 scores meant their failed second attempt would end it, and until the 90s, it was still only used in intense desperation. Bill Cowher attempted the first surprise onside kick in Super Bowl XXX, ironically another Steelers-Cowboys matchup. It worked, but Neil O'Donnell had to pay down some gambling debts. I'm somewhat speculating, but I think this is when we began to see the onside kick reach its full potential. We almost have to guess, because the most reliable play-by-play data only goes back to 1999. As far as I know, there aren't many additional resources regarding the play. Looking at a box score, you'd never know the onside kick existed. The rules of the era also allowed for a much higher likelihood of success when trying to retain possession. Let's look back at the 2001 Bears attempt against Cleveland. What stands out? First, Bears players are starting 10 yards behind the ball. There are 8 Chicago players on one side of the kicker. Each of them takes a running start prior to the kicker making contact with the ball. By the time the bouncing kick goes the required 10 yards, we see that at least 5 Cleveland players aren't even attempting to recover. Their job is apparently to block the Chicago players from interfering with the guys behind them, whose role is to secure the loose ball. One weird bounce, and a pile-up ensues. The whole sequence looks more like something you'd see on a playground. Visualized here is the fourth quarter onside kick conversion rate between 1999 and 2024. I focused on fourth quarter attempts because they better reflect why the play exists. Surprises are fun, but disingenuous when discussing why the play is dead. If the focus was just gotcha moments, we could point to the dynamic kickoff and wrap up the autopsy. Yet, how can I assert that something with a pulse is dead? As you'll soon learn, there were a number of rule changes that catalyzed the end times. Rule changes that occurred well before the implementation of the new dynamic kickoff. But it's not just about conversions. As we understand, the importance of the onside kick is about snatching victory from the jaws of defeat. In a sport that so often comes down to inches, stealing one essential possession should be paramount in engineering wins in the National Football League. As Mike Tomlin would say, there's a fine line between making wine and squashing grapes. Looking at the first and last 6 years of this sample specifically, we see that from 99 to 04, kicking teams recovered their attempts about 16% of the time. Compared to the range from 2019 to 2024, it dropped to about 8%. Just converting a fourth quarter onside kick happens about half as much now as it did 2 decades ago. More importantly though, from 99 to 04, if the kicking team did recover, they won that game roughly 21% of the time. Now, even if a team recovers that desperate fourth quarter onside kick, they only win about 7% of those games. Put plainly, from 1999 to 2004, you would expect to see a game won, thanks in part to the onside kick, once in every 30 attempts. Now, you'd be lucky to see it happen once in 179 attempts. Over the entire range of the sample, we only see about 52 such attempts per season. This isn't statistically skewed to one side either. The last 6 seasons have averaged 55 attempts versus the first 6 only averaging 50. If you're any good at mental math, you'll have computed that what once happened once or twice a year is something we'd now be lucky to observe once every 3 full seasons. It doesn't make much sense, right? To me at least, the 7% win rate is so remarkably mysterious. You'd think that would be the one constant in all of this, or if anything, it would actually be more common to win those games. Moving the ball down the field has seldom been easier. Kickers have never been more efficient, and especially so from distance. Recovering an onside kick around midfield puts most teams on the brink of field goal range. So, I wonder again, why? Maybe if we control for just one-score games, that'll hold the answer. Well, no, these graphs are more or less the same. Even with the evidence I'll soon present, some things remain a mystery. There is no Roger Goodell in the ballroom with a wrench, final answer. Much like the Edmund Fitzgerald, we can understand the conditions that caused a disaster without ever really solving how. As such, it only makes sense to honor those who made this place special. The games, definitely, but more so the kickers. The best to ever do it seldom receive any acknowledgement. Even the GOAT's Wikipedia page ignores his accomplishments. Because at the end of the day, they killed it. Chicago wouldn't be the only team to pull it off in 2001. In Week 16, Cincinnati hosted Pittsburgh. The Steelers had secured home field advantage for the 2001 playoffs, while the Bengals had been eliminated from postseason contention. Nonetheless, the Steelers maintained a 23-10 lead midway through the fourth quarter. After a turnover on downs near midfield, the Steelers looked to ice the game, but an errant pass by Cordell Stewart was intercepted, giving Cincy life with possession in Steeler territory. A few John Kitna passes later, and the Bengals would cut the lead to 6. Neil Rackers lines up for the onside attempt. Rackers would end his career as one of the most successful onside kickers the league has seen since 1999. He's one of just 2 that converted 10 attempts in our range, along with a 38% conversion rate. While we're here, we'll honor Nick Novak and Joe Nedney as well. Their efforts unfortunately never resulted in their team winning, but with a 45% conversion rate on 11 attempts, Novak ranks 3rd in our range for kickers with at least 10 tries. Though I'd say Nedney's 41% on 22 tries rings even more impressive. Only the GOAT also shares a conversion rate greater than 40% when we filter for a minimum of 20 attempts. On to Cincinnati, where naturally we get to witness one of Rackers' best balls, recovered by one of his Bengals teammates. Somehow, because when we watch the review from the endzone cam, we have to wonder how Bobby Shaw doesn't keep this ball. Weird things happen at the bottom of these piles, and apparently the Bengals did just enough to nudge it free. Hushmanzada would catch 3 passes before Kitna delivers what should be the game-winning pass. The thing about being good at onside kicks, it doesn't guarantee success from the field. Gus Johnson can't believe it.
Oh, he missed it! Unbelievable! He missed the extra point!
Rackers would ultimately redeem himself in overtime with a game-winning 31-yarder. Week 3, 2002. Tim Couch would watch from the sideline as Air McNair leads a 9-minute fourth-quarter drive to extend the Titans' lead to 14. You have to wonder if the 28-14 deficit sparked memories of the 21-7 lead his team squandered not even a year ago, because Couch would respond with 8 completions, capped off by an Andre Davis touchdown. Over the course of his near 20-year NFL career, Phil Dawson wouldn't be known for his success kicking onside, with a conversion rate of 15% being around league average. What sets him apart is actually just how many he attempted throughout his time in the league. With 41 attempts, he has far and away been asked to kick more than any other kicker. Only Sebastian Janikowski and Mason Crosby are even in the same stratosphere. With so many attempts, it's no surprise that Dawson was able to test different strategies. In this game against the Titans, he changes directions just before making contact and boots the ball 28 yards downfield. With only one Tennessee player on that side of the field, Dennis Northcutt is able to sprint down and snag the ball just before it goes out of bounds. Poetically, a few plays later, Northcutt would haul in a 3rd down pass from Couch to tie the game. The Browns would win the overtime coin toss, and this time Couch would protect the ball, allowing Dawson to knock in a 33-yard game winner. 7 weeks later, the GOAT would make an appearance. I'm probably not qualified to label anyone the greatest of all time, but the evidence supports my claim. A lot of time, these kicks seem to lack strategy, especially now. Kick the ball on the ground, hope it takes a weird bounce, and try to get lucky. Not Jeff Wilkins. Though his career field goal percentage has him outside the top 50 all time, he is the otherwise forgotten asset of the greatest show on turf. Week 10, 2002. The star-studded Rams offense that includes the likes of Marshall Faulk, Torrey Holt, and Isaac Bruce is crippled by poor QB play from last season's NFL MVP, Kurt Warner. A broken finger in Week 4 would see him replaced by Jamie Martin, though he too would suffer an injury in Week 5, elevating third-stringer Mark Bulger. The team once considered unstoppable found themselves 0-5. But with Bulger under center, the offense would find their stride. They rattle off 3 straight wins ahead of a meeting with Drew Brees and the San Diego Chargers. Still, they'd find themselves down 10 with under 4 to play. After Isaac Bruce hauls in a 34-yard touchdown, Gus Johnson remarks that St. Louis should be considering an onside attempt as the Rams have used all their timeouts. Jeff Wilkins strikes the ball perfectly, kicking straight into the ground, causing the ball to soar 12 yards downfield above everyone, eventually allowing Dre Bly to field the kick as if it were thrown to him. Just needing a field goal to tie, Bulger would instead march down the field, again finding Bruce in the end zone to ultimately win in regulation. Bulger would suffer his own injury in Week 16, and the Rams would finish 7-9, despite being 6-0 in games Bulger started and finished. As a result, Bulger would earn the starting role in 2003, leading the Rams to a 12-4 record and first-round bye, paving the way for what I think is the most iconic Jeff Wilkins play of all time. The Rams, despite being touchdown favorites, were down 11 points late in the fourth, hosting the Carolina Panthers in the NFC divisional round. They'd score a touchdown and 2-point conversion with 2:45 remaining. Needing another Wilkins miracle, he'd not only deliver a perfect onside, he'd track the ball and make a catch in traffic to recover his own kick. This isn't supposed to be a play designed for his recovery. I doubt his coaches would even advise him to participate in the scrum due to the high risk of injury, and yet he'd breathe life into the Rams. The game would famously go on to double overtime, where Steve Smith would house a pass, ending the last winning season St. Louis fans would see before their team relocated to Los Angeles. The Panthers would go on to win the NFC. However, it's possible the only reason they were in this game against the Rams was due to another 2003 onside kick-inspired finish. Week 17, 2003. The Minnesota Vikings have had a famously up-and-down season. A 6-0 start was followed by 4 straight losses. They then alternated winning and losing each week to enter Week 17's matchup with a 9-6 record, having not yet clinched a playoff berth, but maintaining control of their own destiny. A win in Sun Devil Stadium will net them a division title and home playoff game. A loss coupled with a Packers win would see them eliminated from the playoffs entirely. The Cardinals team they're facing off against has one of the worst single-season point differentials in league history. Somehow, the Vikings are only working with an 11-point lead midway through the fourth quarter. The pucker meter skyrockets after Josh McCown leads a touchdown drive to cut the lead to 5. Neil Rackers, we already talked about his success, is no stranger to delivering perfect onside kicks. He converts again, allowing the Cardinals to desperately march down the field late in the game. The Vikings pass rush would nearly end it, but on 4th and 24, the last play of the game, McCown would launch a prayer that was answered thanks to the push-out rule of the time. It's incredible that the 2003 season was so influenced by the onside kick, because it also introduced one of the first major rule changes that would dramatically impact the play's success rate. For a while, this was a pattern too. A rule change would aim to cripple the onside, only for it to pop back up. 2003's alteration changed the allowance of a second onside kick if the kicking team committed a penalty. I saved the game from Week 11 of the 2000 season to show how this used to work. David Akers converted 9 of his 23 attempts, with his 39% conversion rate nearing coin flip territory. And in 2000, he delivered not 1, but 2 in the very same game. Coming into this game, the Steelers hadn't allowed a touchdown in their previous 5 matchups, a streak that was ended by McNabb early in the second quarter, though Andy Reid's offense would find themselves down 10 late in the game. McNabb would engineer another score north of the 2-minute warning, but with only 1 timeout remaining, Akers would be called on to save the game. The first attempt was recovered by the Eagles, though it failed to travel the required 10 yards. The resulting penalty moved the ball back 5 yards, but allowed Akers another chance. Interestingly, the ball was still only required to travel 10 yards, not 15, which is what I would have personally expected. The ball takes an extremely weird bounce before ultimately being recovered by the Eagles, who would go on to win the game in overtime. This victory no longer possible after the 2003 rule change. But, like I said, 2003 wasn't going to let a single rule change kill all hope. In Week 5, we saw another miracle executed by the Colts' infamous
idiot kicker,
Mike Vanderjagt. Tony Dungy led Peyton Manning and the Colts into a highly anticipated Monday Night Football matchup in Tampa Bay. This game had all the makings of a showdown. Dungy got his first head coaching opportunity with the Bucs in '96. He hired Monty Kiffin as his defensive coordinator, and the two would build an extremely powerful defense centered around what would become known as the Tampa 2. Unfortunately, after 3 straight playoff losses, Dungy would be replaced by John Gruden when Tampa traded 2 first-round picks to Oakland for the highly sought-after head coach. Dungy would be hired by the Colts to take over for Jim Mora, who had been terminated following his famous 2001
playoffs.
Gruden would go on to win the Super Bowl in 2002 during his first season as Buccaneers head coach. John had retained many of the defensive staff originally hired by Dungy, most notably Monty Kiffin and Mike Tomlin. Years later, Dungy would be regarded as the man that set up Gruden for success when he arrived in Tampa, but at the time, it just looked like Gruden had taken this team and gotten over the hump that Dungy never could. The Colts entered the game 4-0, but would struggle tonight, including one of the weirdest plays you'll ever see. Brad Johnson sails a pass that is easily intercepted, but during the return, Doss coughs up the ball which lands right in the path of Keenan McCardell, who returns it for a Buccaneers score. After another Indianapolis punt, Tampa would score again, resulting in a 21-0 halftime score. Things seemed to be all but over considering Tony Dungy's 0-18 record when trailing by 17-plus points. With 5 minutes remaining, a desperate pass by Manning would be intercepted by Rondé Barber and returned for 6, pushing the deficit back to 21, and effectively ending the game. The Colts would get a break after a well-executed wedge block springs Brad Pryett free for 90 yards. After a quick score, the onside kick was inevitable. Vanderjagt pops a perfect high hopper in what would be the only successful onside kick of his 9-season NFL career. Manning would find Marvin Harrison to cut the lead to 1 score before the 2-minute warning. This shot of Gruden and Mike Tomlin in disbelief encapsulates what I imagine most Tampa faithful were feeling. Vanderjagt would attempt another onside kick, but despite having a chance at the ball, the Colts would fail to recover. In a perfect world, this is where things would end. But you don't need me to tell you that we don't live in a perfect world. On to overtime. Vanderjagt would miss a 40-yard would-be game winner, only for the refs to call unsportsmanlike conduct on the defense for leaping.
Oh, man! Leaping! What in the world? What is that? What kind of a call is that?
I have no idea.
Vanderjagt would barely make the second attempt from 29 yards, banging it in off the upright. Moving on to the 2004 season, the Seahawks would fight back from a 29-17 deficit to take a 32-29 lead with under 5 to play. Seattle would intercept Vinny Testaverde on the next series and miraculously score their third touchdown in the fourth quarter to take their own 2-score lead with 2:46 remaining. It's hard to overcome America's team though, because on the next drive, Keyshawn Johnson, who had been brought over from that same Tampa team that blew the 35-14 lead the previous season, would be awarded a touchdown despite very obviously touching out of bounds before securing 2 feet in. Al Michaels was once again beside himself that this review didn't result in an incomplete pass. Of course, Billy Cundiff would execute a perfect onside kick that is plucked out of the air by Jason Witten, and taking this game to overtime would be too much, so Julius Jones would rush in the game winner. Week 12, 2005, the last season before the slow demolition of the onside kick. The Rams' 7th-round draft pick out of Harvard would take the first snaps of his professional career after Jamie Martin suffered a concussion to make way for Ryan Fitzpatrick. Despite being down 10 with under 2 to play, NFL fans would witness the birth of Fitzmagic. Facing a 4th and 6 at midfield, now working with just 34 seconds, Fitzy would find Isaac Bruce downfield for a desperation touchdown to pull within 3. The GOAT would once again deliver for the Rams with a deep onside that allows Fitzpatrick to get into his field goal range and send the game to OT. Despite losing the toss, Fitz would get a chance and deliver a screen pass that St. Louis would take the distance, the Rams once again being saved by the leg of Jeff Wilkins. 2006 would introduce the first major rule change in preventing these types of miracles. The change mandated that a minimum of 4 players be lined up on either side of the kicker. Kicking teams could no longer have 8 guys running headfirst into the receiving team, and using a heavy set on one side as a decoy like Phil Dawson showed us would be much more difficult. I love VTJKRU's sentiment here from a 2006 thread discussing the change. If you ask them, they probably thought the play was dead in 2006. They were kind of right though, because as a result, the 2006 season would be the first since at least 1999 in which no team won after successfully utilizing an onside kick, in part due to a sample low 38 attempts being significantly lower than our 52 mark average. Though I hope VTJKRU didn't stop watching in 2007, because like I said, the onside kick loves making a splash with its back against the wall. This time near the shores of another Great Lake. For the first time in 13 long years, Monday Night Football would be in Buffalo, New York. Not because the Bills did anything special in 2006, more so due to the fact Tony Romo and the Cowboys were visiting. Romo, in his second year as starter, was doing well to shake off the stink he carried due to the botched snap costing Dallas a win in the 2006 NFC wildcard against Seattle. He entered the game on a heater, having thrown for 1,200 yards, 11 touchdowns with another 2 on the ground, and just 3 interceptions en route to the Cowboys' undefeated 4-0 record. Facing off against a 1-3 Bills team led to the boys being 11-point favorites. But Romo would have a horrendous night, so bad it's somewhat surprising he wasn't benched. He threw 5 interceptions, including 2 returned for touchdowns.
Romo's been intercepted 4 times. 5 times. Intercepted again. Unbelievable.
This is bizarre.
A sputtering Bills offense helmed by Trent Edwards and a rookie Marshawn Lynch would somehow only convert Romo's errors to an 8-point lead with under 4 to play. Despite his flaws, Romo is statistically one of the most clutch quarterbacks of the past quarter century. More on that in a future video. And he'd turn it on again to score a touchdown with just 20 seconds remaining. Wade Phillips would burn Dallas's last time out to prepare for a game-tying 2-point conversion, only for T.O. to not come down with the fade. Nick Folk was in his first year of his almost 2-decade-long career that still sees him employed by the Jets, though his onside conversion rate is not one of the reasons he's been around so long. With a 9% conversion rate, he's just below league average when he lines up to kick. But his first ever attempt would be one of the 2 his teams have recovered, with the awkward deflection setting up Dallas in Buffalo territory. Romo finds T.O. at the 25 and is able to spike the ball with a single second remaining. Except, despite Dallas being allowed to snap the ball, officials would review the previous catch and rightfully determine that the pass was incomplete. 13 seconds remaining now. Quick out. 7 seconds. How about another? 2 seconds, and on comes the rookie to attempt a 53-yarder in the outdoor stadium mere miles from the shallow, often windy Lake Erie. Bang. Dead center. Wait, no, the Bills iced him. Try again. Bang. Again. Both kicks are so dead center it's almost hard to tell them apart. From 53 yards out, on the right hash that typically doesn't favor right-footed kickers, Nick Folk puts both attempts right down Broadway. The recovery with just 18 seconds remaining, providing the least amount of time we've seen, turned into a win. 2008 would also deliver a lone comeback catalyzed by the onside kick. Phillip Rivers would spend the better part of a game getting outplayed by Chiefs quarterback Tyler Thigpen. After the 2-minute warning, he'd wake up, finding Malcolm Floyd for a score, though they'd similarly fail to convert their 2-point attempt. Punter Matt Seifers would be called on to execute the onside, and Dwayne Bowe would make an uncharacteristic mistake when the ball pops loose and lands in the hands of Chargers player Kasim Osgood. Rivers would hit Vincent Jackson for the lead, but thanks to poor clock management by Norv Turner, leave 36 seconds left for the Chiefs. They'd still win, but only because Chiefs kicker Connor Barth would miss a 50-yard field goal as time expired. 2009. The NFL adopts a new rule prohibiting more than 5 players from bunching up for an onside kick, further mandating that the kicking team have at least 3 players on each side of the ball, outside the hash marks, and at least 1 outside the numbers. Additionally, the 2003 change would go into effect for the entire game, not just inside the final 5 minutes. In an effort to reduce violent collisions, with pressure mounting regarding the high frequency of kickoff-related injuries, the wedge block would also be limited to just 2 players. Funnily enough, this season would see the highest rate of converted fourth-quarter onside kicks we've seen since 1999, yet no teams would capitalize on these efforts and turn their fortune into victory. Sean Payton couldn't be bothered by these metrics when he attempted a surprise onside kick to open the second half of the Super Bowl that season. Shortly after The Who performed at halftime, also marking the last time a rock band was the sole headliner of the Super Bowl halftime show. Hindsight is 20/20, but it's weird how sometimes these things work in tandem. While this moment doesn't register as a losing team using it in the fourth quarter, it's easily the most iconic onside kick of all time. As such, Thomas Morstead has a spot in the Hall. He never put up insane numbers or anything, but this was his first onside attempt in his NFL career, and that's gotta count for something. In 2010, David Akers and the Eagles would only need 1 attempt with a surprise fourth quarter onside that prompted the incredible finish of the Miracle at the New Meadowlands, before 2011 introduced the next major blow to the success of the onside kick. Now, players were required to start within 5 yards of the kicking line, which had been moved up to the 35. This eliminated much of the running start players made, allowing them to get under a high kick before being easily recovered by the receiving team. In 5 years, they had completely changed this play, from having most of the team engage in a huge scrum with a 10-yard running start to a maximum of 6 guys starting 5 yards behind the kicking line. Still, Tim Tebow would find himself on the blessed side of desperation. It's hard not to think the NFL is scripted sometimes, because Tebow would get his first ever NFL start during the Broncos' visit to Miami, a return to his home state of Florida. Naturally, this means a lot of the fans in attendance weren't rooting for the Dolphins, instead supporting the former Heisman Trophy winner that brought their Florida Gators a national championship. Through 54 minutes, the Tebow-led Broncos were held scoreless. Tebow was in the midst of an abysmal homecoming. Through the air, he was just 4 for 14 for 60 yards, and the ground game wasn't much better. The second half hadn't shown any signs of improvement, as he was sitting at 1 completion on 9 attempts, a true Justin Fields performance. He wasn't getting any help from his kicker either, as Matt Prater had missed 2 kicks from inside 50 yards in the first half. But the legend of Tim Tebow wouldn't go down easy. He'd lead a scoring drive, going 4 for 5 with 71 yards and a score along with a nice pickup on the ground, relying on Demaryius Thomas to make a great catch. Matt Prater would make the extra point to cut the lead to 8, but would further have a chance to redeem himself if he could convert an onside kick, which of course he would do, giving Tebow the chance to march down the field, hit Daniel Fells for a touchdown, and then walk in the QB draw to tie the game. Tebow wouldn't attempt another pass this game. Miami would win the toss and punt, then Denver, before a Dolphins fumble gave up the ball in Prater's field goal range. Despite his kicker missing from 43 and 49 earlier in the game, John Fox would call 3 runs before attempting the kick from 52, which Prater would drill, walking the Broncos off. The next miracle would come in Week 14 of 2013. The Patriots were somehow trailing the lowly Browns by 12 points at home with under 3 to play. At this point, the Pats were in the midst of their drought. Despite playing in 2 Super Bowls since the 2004 season, they'd lost both. The second Brady-Belichick dynasty was only getting started. Brady would lead a smooth scoring drive, but with just a minute remaining and no timeouts, needed a miracle. The refs calling an unnecessary roughness on a rookie Jordan Poyer would certainly help, moving the kickoff line up to midfield. Jim Nantz would remind us that the last time New England even recovered an onside kick was 19 seasons ago, poetically in the 1994 wildcard game against none other than the Cleveland Browns, a team that, at the time, was led by head coach Bill Belichick. The 330 games since their last recovery being the longest active streak in the NFL at the time. Of course, the man who started his career as a special teams expert had something up his sleeve. The Patriots lineup bunched prior to Gostowski's run-up, before players on either side of the ball make runs towards midfield. Prior to the motion, the Browns had lined up with only 1 player inside the numbers and none inside the hashes. The strategy is genius. At contact, there are still 0 Cleveland players inside the hashes. They collapse towards the straightforward kick, but reach the ball at the same time as New England players, the first 2 of which move to block Browns from their attempted recovery. An unblocked player reaches for the ball as it nears Gostowski, but is unable to recover, allowing the Patriots to recover their first onside kick since New Year's Day 1995. At that point, Tom Brady wasn't going to be denied, aided by one of the softest DPI calls you may ever see.
That's, I think, a terrible call.
Giving New England the ball at the 1, where they would inevitably score the game-winning touchdown. We wouldn't get one during the 2014 regular season, though Pat McAfee would make his mark, earning an All-Pro nod thanks in part due to 3 successful tries in the first 6 weeks of the NFL season, including his iconic self-recovery against the Texans on Thursday Night Football. However, being down multiple scores in the NFC Championship game would show just how much times have changed since the beginning of the Super Bowl era. We knew the 2014 NFC Championship would be a banger. The defending Super Bowl champions, along with the Legion of Boom, were hosting the 2014 NFL MVP Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers. The Pack dominated the first 40 minutes of the game, carrying a 12-point advantage late into the 4th. Big Mike certainly thought the game was over and they'd punched their ticket to the big game. His lackluster play calling reflected that, managing back-to-back quick 3-and-outs. Russ delivered one of his most impressive performances, eventually scoring before the 2-minute warning. Steven Hauschka would convert an unimpressive 14% of his career attempts, but Brandon Bostic muffs this one, allowing Seattle to steal a possession at midfield. Beast Mode would famously break one for a score seconds later. While Vintage Rodgers would do enough to allow Mason Crosby the chance to tie it, the Seahawks would receive the first possession in overtime, and Jermaine Kearse would give Seattle the chance to win back-to-back Super Bowls. The Packers, on the other hand, became just another Great Lakes team to be trapped within the waves of the chaos where the onside kick takes refuge. All thanks to the last stolen victory before the play was nerfed into oblivion. We wouldn't see another such victory for half a decade, though the conversion rate did try to rebound. In 2017, we saw the highest success rate since 2009, despite none of these recoveries prompting victory. The strangest aspect of these 10 conversions in 2017 is that 3 of the 10 were kicked by none other than Cody Parkey. The Dolphins would go 6-10 during Adam Gase's second season, but Parkey converted 3 of his 4 attempts on the year. In fact, he has the highest conversion percentage of any kicker since 1999, with 6 of his 10 attempts being recovered by the kicking team. It's incredible, really. While his Miami teams wouldn't make good use of his efforts, 2 of the conversions came against the same team in the span of 2 weeks, both against the Buffalo Bills. Something about those Great Lakes teams. But as is usually the case when the onside kick surges, more rule changes would be implemented to eliminate its existence. Before the 2018 season, the league further changed the alignment of the kicking team. Instead of being able to set up within 5 yards of the kicking line, teams now had to be within a single yard. This removed the ability for teams to generate any sort of running start. The change was adopted as part of continued efforts to make all kickoffs safer. Whether or not the onside kick was even mentioned in these considerations is, as far as I can tell, undocumented. Other changes, like bringing touchbacks out to the 25 instead of the 20, requiring 2 players on either side of the numbers, and eliminating all wedge blocks, further changed the appearance of the now merely symbolic kickoff. As a result, the conversion rate again plummeted. 2019 propped back up, but only because of Younghoe Koo and Eddie Pinheiro, who both converted 2 successful onside kicks in the same game, despite both games being losing efforts. Koo famously converted 3 on Thanksgiving night against New Orleans, though one of them was called back due to penalty. Koo was recently cut by the Falcons after a few too many missed field goals, which led to him being signed by the Giants and embarrassing himself on Monday Night Football. But his 50% conversion rate is second to only Cody Parkey, and you almost have to consider Koo's success as more impressive, as all but one of Parkey's 6 predated the 2018 rule changes. Koo is the only kicker I researched other than Thomas Morstead, whose Wikipedia page acknowledges the existence of an onside kick. Ironically, the first onside victory since the 2014 NFC Championship game would come against his Falcons team in the second week of 2020. The Falcons raced out to a 20-point first-quarter lead in Jerry World, thanks in part to fumbles by Dak, Zeke, and Dalton Schultz. A high-scoring affair would result, and Atlanta would be working with a 39-24 lead with 8 to go. Dak would lean on Schultz to cut the lead to 9, and Matty Ice would give us his best Super Bowl impression when he took a sack on second down. Just inside 2 minutes, Dak would rush in a touchdown of his own, cutting the lead to 2, with Dallas now relying on the leg of Greg Zuerlein. One thing about the more modern onside kick is that they require a lot more luck. Sometimes that luck comes in the form of defensive ineptitude. Zuerlein elected to not use a tee, instead laying the ball flat on the ground. He takes no run-up, instead stabbing at the ball from a standing position. The kick looks more like when you try a low onside in Madden and don't fill the power bar enough. And yet, Falcons players let it roll, and roll, and roll until it finally goes the required 10 yards, then allowing a CJ Godwin recovery for the Cowboys. Thankfully, the Falcons would lose, because it's just disrespectful, really. 2021 would be another outlier year in a sea of regression. Weirdly enough, 4 of the 7 successful attempts would come in Week 14, leading into the season with our last salvage victory. During his 3 seasons as a Jet, Joe Flacco would only start a total of 9 games. One of these games would be on the shores of yet another Great Lake. The 2 lackluster franchises in New York and Cleveland would go back and forth for the majority of the game until a Nick Chubb touchdown seemed to put things to bed, giving the Browns a 2-touchdown lead. Except, Cade York would miss the extra point. Shouldn't matter though. Joe Flacco only had 2 minutes to try and generate 2 touchdowns. In the other 58 minutes, the Myles Garrett-led defense had only allowed 2 total touchdowns. There'd be no reason to think they couldn't pull this off. Jacoby Brissett had played well as he served as the Browns' interim starter, holding down the fort before Deshaun Watson finished his suspension and could make his debut in Cleveland. But as we now know, the football gods had no intentions of letting the Browns off easy for their offseason move. In 2 plays, the Elite Dragon would find Corey Davis wide open for a 66-yard touchdown. The extra point made it a 6-point game. Punter Braden Mann would attempt the onside, and the Browns would brown. We've seen this movie before. A few plays later, Flacco would find Garrett Wilson for a touchdown, and the extra point would win them the game because death, taxes, and the Browns living in hell. The recovery with just 122 remaining provided the smallest margin for success since the Browns game against New England 9 seasons earlier. Only 2 onside kicks would be recovered in 2023 before the dynamic kickoff rules introduced in 2024 buried the last remaining chances the onside kick had for a true revival. Due to the change in the kickoff formation, now requiring teams to line up ahead of the kicking line 10 yards apart from each other, kicking teams would have to announce their intention to kick an onside kick. They'd only be allowed to do so if they were trailing in the last 5 minutes of the game. This would be changed in 2025 to allow for a try at any point in the game, as if it really matters anymore. While Chicago would execute a successful onside against Minnesota to force overtime, once again winning the first possession of extra innings, Sam Darnold wouldn't emulate 2001 Tim Couch, instead leading a scoring drive to steal a victory on the shores of Lake Michigan. Finally, as if to say goodbye to the play, the Bears would allow the Bengals to come screaming back during their 2025 matchup, giving up an onside to Cincinnati, allowing Joe Flacco to potentially become the first quarterback observed to win twice as a result of a successful onside when the Bengals quickly punched in a score for the lead. Breaking the curse of the Great Lakes, the Bears would score a touchdown of their own, as if to signal to their fellow Great Lakes brothers that this play can't hurt them anymore. This may be the closest we get to an onside victory for years, as we've only had 2 in the past completed 10 seasons. With NFL executives all but guaranteeing its departure from the game, at least we got to enjoy its golden era. I hope you enjoyed this journey through the life and death of the onside kick. If we're lucky enough to witness it produce another victory before even the ghost departs us, I hope we all savor it a little bit more.